Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, December 4th. As we always do, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I noticed.
Before we begin our tonight's agenda, I just wanted to mention that last week we lost two people in Walpole who put in a lot of years serving Walpole. The first was Joe Deneen, who served as a selectman for 4 years from 2003 to 2007. He also served as an RTM for 40 years from 1978 to 2018. He was on capital budget for many, many years. Finance Committee from 2010 to 2017, and the Veterans Committee from 2012 to 2018. Joe was a fixture in the community. He was always available for people to talk with, and his passing is heartfelt for lots of people in Walpole. His wake was tonight, and his funeral is tomorrow. Also last week, we lost William Bill Maloney, who was also on the Board of Selectmen for 10 years, from 1990 to 2000. He also served as a planning board member previous to that from 1980 to 1989. He was one of the original RTM and served for 1 year, 71 to 72, and later ran and served for a total of 32 years. Both will be missed by the Walpole community.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Jim,
might,
please.
I'd like to just add to what you said, because I had the opportunity to serve with Bill Maloney on this board back when he was on the board, and of course Joe Deneen was a great friend of mine as well. And so it is really sad to have both of them pass, and Walpole has lost a couple of true friends in the last week, and their voices are going to be missed. I remember Bill on this board, and I always thought of him as sort of the conscience of the board. Because while we were off tackling big issues of the day, whatever those happened to be, Bill always reminded us that potholes mattered too. You know, we learned about hip guys and flowable fill and you know, all kinds of things that only Bill seemed to know, and he kept us on track, and we never lost sight of that. And Joe, of course, was a great friend to all of us. I remember the first time I ran for the Board of Selectmen, Joe gave me one piece of advice. He said, listen, if you win or if you lose, I don't care how late you're out, get those signs down first thing the next day. And we always did that. So they're two great voices, two great friends of our town, and will be sorely missed. And thoughts and prayers to the families.
Thanks, Jim. First up tonight is Police Chief John Carmichael with a quarterly update. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you. Good evening. So very busy quarter, so I'll try and plug through this as quickly as possible. I did give you guys a packet that you should have in front of you there. First thing I'll touch on is personnel. Recruit officers George Bird and Nicholas Politopoulos are probably about halfway through their police academy. They're at the Transit Academy in Quincy, and they're doing well. Officer Kelly, who's out here in the audience, has completed his FTO, Field Training Officer program and everything, and out there doing it on his own now. So thank you, Officer Kelly. Officer Giblin, who was here for approximately 2 years, just transferred out. He transferred to the Boston Police Department. Officer Giblin was living in West Roxbury throughout his time here, and decided his family is living in there and everything, has a baby and another one on the way, so he decided to take the opportunity that came up in Boston, and he'll be going into their academy December 3rd. Sergeant Giampa has announced his retirement after 34 years with the Walpole Police Department. He's going to retire in January. And if none of you know Steve Giampa, one of the nicest guys you will ever meet. Just a real good guy, a lot of compassion, and he's done a great job for the town of Walpole over the last 34 years. Dispatcher Matt Tedesco came on board, and Dispatcher Pat Baker, who also came on board. This did bring our staffing on combined police and fire dispatch, public safety dispatch to 10 dispatchers. They did go through pretty extensive training over the past few months since we've moved into the new station, and learning kind of the ropes and everything on how to do combined dispatch. The fire department's been working with them on, using their lingo and using the demands and the needs that the fire department has, so that the dispatchers are able to coordinate all the assets that are needed at any type of a scene, as well as doing the emergency medical dispatch side of things and everything. So they've all done a great job. We're really up and running and moving forward on that. And looks like it's going to be a good success for us. We did get a grant for $12,000 through the 911 system. This is for us accepting and assuming the wireless direct 911 system. So now anybody in Walpole, if you call 911 from our cell phone, it will go directly to the Walpole Police Department. There's no going through the state police headquarters and then them getting the information, transferring it to us. It's all geofence, so if you call 911, it goes directly to us, and then we take the call from there. Coming in the next month or so will be text 911. So we'll also be able to take text messages in the event that the person can't speak. So the technology is really moving ahead, and it's advancing, so we're pretty happy about that. Some of the training, the major trainings that we've had, mental health, community crisis intervention teams. Brookline PD came in. They trained about 40 officers in mental health training at the department for free, and we provided the space and everything. It's a pretty intensive training that they do. There's all types of scenario-based training involved in it, where they have to actually role play and they have to handle situations and de-escalate those situations and make the right decisions on how to handle it. So it was pretty intense. We appreciate Brookline PD for having it here too. It worked out really well. The ALICE training. The last couple of years we've been reassessing our school violence response, and the big turning point was Parkland, Florida. There was a lot of different things that happened. That was a game changer. People know that there was a lot of red flags that came up before that school shooting that should have been addressed. There was a lot of failures along the way that happened, and so we started to look at our program, and we used to have the locate, lock, leave, live. Now we're going to transition back to ALICE. I think that it's the best way to go, because it's not just a narrow focus on school shooting or school violence in and of itself. It's a focus on critical incidents, and the response in ALICE is consistent with any type of critical incident. So we're going to go forward with that. The entire town, every school in Walpole is going to be trained in ALICE, and I trained 4 police officers. Officer Hart, O'Connor, Crown, and Songen are all ALICE trained. We've done the online e-training with all of the teachers in Walpole. We just finished today with Boyden School, which was the last school that we had to do the scenario-based training with our teachers, and that's teachers, custodians, cafeteria workers, everybody. Everybody is involved on the same page. So we did the scenario-based training, and then the next thing is going to be to train the students, because there was always an issue and debate on, do we train the students in ALICE and to what degree? And we've come to the conclusion that, especially in the high school, that the ALICE protocol should be taught to our high school students. And after Parkland, they were very vocal about it and wanting to know what the process is and how they're supposed to react to critical incidents. And so we've done that, and we're going to be moving forward. I just want you to know that the ALICE protocol is age appropriate. So in other words, the kids in the younger grades, all they need to know is what ALICE means, and then what to do when we evacuate, or we reverse evacuate, or if we shelter in place. The kids just need to know that terminology. They don't need to know really what the incident is. So the way we're training this out is that it is age appropriate, so that the kids, we don't want to scare them or do anything like that. So the next big thing is going to be the ASHA training, active shooter, hostile event training, and that's going to be a joint training between the police and the fire department. We know that what we would do in an active shooter situation, is the police will develop a team, and then they were going to enter the school or whatever building it might be, and they would stop that threat. Obviously using the means necessary that we have. And then the next stage is rescue task force teams, which would be several police officers that would be teamed up with a firefighter that would make entry into a warm zone, so that the zones, the threat stopped, but it's still a warm zone, in order to treat people that are injured. And basically, the goal is to save lives and not let people, as have happened in other states, die because we didn't act quick enough and we waited until that zone was cold, and the fire department and the police, they didn't have the training necessary or the equipment to get in and treat people sooner, or soon enough, I should say. So the last thing is, that's pretty much it for our training. Lincoln Lynch and the schools have agreed to provide some of the funding for this training, and we plan on doing that after we get all of the ALICE training done with our students, hopefully in the early spring. So just some of the big issues, as I gave you the kind of the rundown. I will say that our biggest issues that we're dealing with right now are still domestic violence, domestic disturbances. We do still have, we're using the high-risk assessment evaluations for every domestic violence call that we have, so that we can get resources through the DA's office. Our mental health calls are increasing significantly. It's, I'm short of saying that it's an epidemic, but it's certainly an issue. In fact, this quarter isn't even over. We're only a couple months into this quarter. And up to this point, we've already had over 60 mental health calls. And when I refer to mental health calls, I mean Section 12's involuntary commitments, suicidal ideation, suicides, Section 35's involuntary drug commitments. Those are what we're dealing with. And they're very time consuming, and our officers and our dispatchers are doing a great job in dealing with social issues like this, and issues that we're dealing with in the community that aren't really the traditional stuff that law enforcement would deal with. So another issue is OUI drugs. There is an increase in OUI drugs. We had 2 crashes last week with marijuana involved after the legalization moves forward. They're all side crashes, because people under the influence of THC will lose their peripheral vision, and they'll strike things that are to either side of them. It's almost like they're driving with tunnel vision, so that's why you'll see a lot of pedestrians get struck, bicyclists, side swipe type accidents, that type of thing. Overdoses, you have the overdose situational awareness. In 2017, we had 34 total, 6 fatalities, and up to this point this year, we've had 27 overdoses and 3 fatalities. So the numbers are down. I think naloxone was used more time this year than last year, which could attribute somewhat to the number of fatalities we've had, but total overdoses are down. Significant events. I attended a parole hearing today, in fact. This had to do with the homicide that occurred in McDonald's in 1993. A young man, Scott Christopher Down, was shot when he left the back side of McDonald's to go dump the trash. 2 individuals shot him in the parking lot. So I was able to go to the parole hearing today. He was given life with parole. And I will say that it was very touching to see the family and what they were going through. 25 years later, it was almost as if this happened yesterday, and the pain and suffering that the family's gone through. And they did a great job testifying to make sure that they keep Demetrius Sally in prison where he belongs. But they did a great job, and I certainly feel for the family. And they did mention the commission multiple times that this also had an impact on the Walpole community in and of itself. I'm sure many people haven't forgotten about that incident. Some of the other big issues, we had a pursuit that took place that Officer Bieber and Haber were involved. It was a very short pursuit, but The vehicle was operating under the influence. It had pulled into a parking lot on Elm Street. And Officer Bieberman, because there was people outside of their vehicles pointing to where this person was that had been driving over lawns and everything, he positioned his vehicle in a parking lot so that the car couldn't escape. But the operator wasn't going to have that, so the operator rammed his cruiser and then continued to strike Officer Bieberman's cruiser. Officer Haber was able to come in and kind of box them in, and they were able to approach that vehicle and remove the person before anybody was seriously injured. But, they did find heroin, and that person blew a .12 on a breath test. But they did a great job, and Officer Bieberman and Haber put themselves in danger, really, to make sure that they protected everybody else. We had an armed barricaded subject. It was a hostage situation. We do have we did give a commendation for this. Sergeant White, Officer Bieberman, Perchicante, Foley, Kelly, Dispatcher Wren. Wave, Brittany. They did an amazing job. This was a very serious situation. Somebody that was armed with an assault rifle that was holding people hostage. I won't get into how the whole thing unfolded, but at some point the officers were able to get the family outside, evacuate them, and the individual tried to flee the home, and then we were able to catch up with him and arrest him without any incident other than what we dealt with initially. You don't see that a lot. I mean, they did a great job de-escalating that and taking the person into custody. Most recently, a pursuit started in Norwood with Norwood officers that came into Walpole. The individual had a firearm. He struck a utility pole and spun around. It struck a Norwood cruiser, and the individual started to fire at the police. He fired 6 rounds. One of the rounds hit himself in the head, and he subsequently passed out. And if you look at the dynamics of this pursuit and the aftermath of the shooting, if the person did not pass out because he had shot himself accidentally, it would have continued. That's the only reason why he stopped shooting. He was going to pass out. He dropped the gun, and the officers were able to move in and extract him out of the vehicle and get him in handcuffs and everything. So, again, another tragedy was diverted, and just great police work and good tactics are really the reason why. So I just want to mention, Selectman O'Neill mentioned last time that, when I mentioned the commendations over the quarter, that would be nice to bring in some of the officers so that you guys could recognize them. There was 3 situations that occurred. One was a medical emergency where a baby was born in the bathtub. This was dispatcher Jackman and Tedesco, who aren't here, but they did a great job with the emergency medical dispatch and getting the fire department and officers there to help out with that situation. There was a suicidal subject. This night was a very busy night for us, but we had a sudden death. We had a suicide. We had another individual suicidal ideation that was, we had to track their cell phone. Officers Maganello and Perchicante activated our ATVs, and they were able to locate that person very deep, like past the town forest and everything, and talk to that person and get them the resources that they needed because of the emotions and the things that person was going through. So they did a great job with that. Officer Slavin, Michelle is also here tonight. She was involved with that. Officer Kelly. Detective Mike Benner was here that night. He was on duty and responded to the suicide call. So they just did a great job. We like to recognize them for the stuff when they kind of go above and beyond and deal with the things that they've been dealing with. So, and then we had an overdose where Detective Tolan, Moriarty, Beaverman, and Doherty responded. The reason why I liked this call was because when we first got there, there was a lot of almost anti-police sentiment that was involved, and lack of trust. And by the time we left, they were actually hugging the officers and thanking them for saving their loved one. And to me, with everything going on in this country right now, that's a home run. Like we got there and it was just almost like they didn't want us there. It was uncooperative, but by the time we left, they knew that we were there to help, and hopefully that helped build some trust for later on, next time. And the last one was the barricaded subject, Sergeant White, Officer Beaverman, Officer Perchicante, Foley, Officer Kelly again, superstar this month, Dispatcher Wren again, and Dispatcher Ryan. They did a great job with that whole situation. Critical incident that could have gone, anything could have happened, could have ended in tragedy, but it didn't. And then there's our typical community policing stuff. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention all of the community policing initiatives the officers get involved with every day. So appreciate that. We did have community policing week, which is a very good thing, and you know, you guys know what we do on that side of things, so we've just been trying to keep that up. So that's pretty much it.
Great, I'll open it up to comments or questions. Jim?
So, Chief, since you've got your officers and dispatcher here, I wonder if we could just have them come up to the podium for just a second so we can acknowledge them.
Sure.
That'd be awesome.
Come on up, guys.
You know,
Last time you were here was an interview.
You know, we think we live in a, you know, relatively small town, relatively safe town, but yet when the chief comes in and we hear the things you actually do deal with day in and day out, there's a reminder that there is real danger out there. And you all put your lives on the line every day when you go to work. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate that. And wonderful work on the work you did to get the commendations. And Chief, thanks very much for having them come on in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
I've got one just
Sure, go right ahead.
question too. So Chief, on the mental illness stuff that you talked about in the spike up, you're saying, you have any theories on what's underneath that and driving it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, whenever we're trying to deal with situations that we're addressing out there, we always try to come up with what we attribute it to. And I honestly don't know.
Interesting.
You know, I don't want to say that, you know, here in Walpole we have some special needs schools. We have group homes that obviously have special needs and certain things that they need from us. So that's one part of it, but that's not the reason. That's not the underlying issue. And I believe me, I struggle over this one a lot, trying to figure it out. And you go through the reports, and the officers and they're going on these calls, and they're trying to get to the bottom of it because we got problem solving oriented. We're trying to deal with reoccurring problems, but I don't know. I really don't.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Let me go to Nancy.
The ALICE protocol, you know, you had mentioned like the school department is gonna be helped to fund it.
Yep.
And then it's gonna come from the police budget. How much is that total gonna cost the town? Because, I mean, it's absolutely, obviously needed, wanted, and things like that, but it's kind of crazy that it comes from the education budget. I mean, is it something that we should be looking at separately? Because we talk about all these like unfunded mandates, we talk about just the cost of education, and it's amazing.
Yep. So some of it, what I didn't mention is that the school's got like 80 new radios, so that they have interoperability within the school, and they can contact our school resource officers. They can they'll be able to contact us directly at the police station through the radio system. Part of that was part of the station project, so that we could have that, you know, the communications when we did dispatch and everything. The other issue is that I think they did this out of their own capital, but there are phones in every classroom in Walpole, and those phones, other than OPR is getting them last, I think, but they have capability of calling the desk in the school office, or they have capability of calling 911. We've trained them also that the cell phone system, if they call 911, will go directly to us. And so there's better setup for radios, telephones to keep that information going back and forth. We also put all the go bags, the emergency go bags, in every classroom in Walpole. In fact, those are the red bags that you see right at the front, right at the door of every classroom. That also came in through the old the school budget. The training that we're talking about soon, the ASHA training, that link, they have a certain amount in their budget every year that's designed to go to security of the schools and to the police and training and everything. So that's where we're getting that. But several years ago, if you recall, we had a company come in called Synergy, and they did our active shooter protocol. That's when we went to the locate, lock, leave, live. That costs the town of Walpole thousands of dollars. And we doing this on our own. Like, the Walpole Police Department is very self-sufficient, I think, in a lot of areas. This is another one that we're gonna be, because we trained 4 officers in Alice. Those officers are trained the trainers so they can train everybody else. And so we're probably actually saving money by doing it the way that we're doing. But
I'm sure that you are, but maybe this is more a question for Jim. If you could put all the pieces together, I'd love to know what the cost is that we're putting in for security. I mean, it's just, considering it's in the police budget, it's in the school budget, and they need to be safe, but I just find it a funny number that instead of education, it then just gets absorbed into education, whereas it could be just used on education, and it's sad that we need to do it.
Sure. They can do that.
David?
A quick question about the cell phone 911. So I know when you call the state police, you get locked, the phone gets locked. Does that happen? And does it also, can you locate that phone?
I don't know about the lock. I don't know if we lock it, Britt?
No.
Okay, because when I've called the state police in the past, you cannot use the phone for any other purpose. They lock your phone for a couple of minutes, because if they want to call you back, for some reason they don't let you use your phone. It locks it up. But,
No, we don't.
Okay. We are able to track where you are. So if you're standing in the middle of Bird Park and you call 911, within several feet, we're going to know how to get to you. So it's pretty accurate. The one issue we're dealing with is a lot of phones in people's pockets that are accidentally calling 911. We're getting an awful lot of those right now.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chief. I know you and I had briefly discussed this maybe a couple of months ago. Is there any consideration of partnering with the National Rifle Association, because they do offer a program, and I think it's for free? Is there any opportunity to partner with them and at least avail ourselves of some of the free programming for the school safety that I can't remember the name of the program.
I looked at that, and I'd have to look at it again to see if there's like funding available and everything. I can give that another look, but right now, like we haven't, other than we trained the 4 officers in Alice, who a lot of them were already trained the trainer certified. We haven't really, other than paying, the officers being there and doing the training, we haven't really spent much.
But is it something you could look into?
Sure.
Because if they offer additional officer training from a different perspective, maybe to marry up with the Alice training, if it costs nothing, it might be worth exploring.
And Sergeant White did. He's doing a grant through Firehouse Subs. It's actually called. They give out a lot of grant money to get more. And Mark was a big proponent of us getting the ballistics vests and the Kevlar helmets that we have on the cruisers and everything. The fire department will also, when we do the ASHA training, would need that equipment. So we're trying to get some grant money to help pay for that.
Could you expand on that? The what equipment would because they'll be going into the warm zone?
If you try to envision, I'll specifically say like an active shooter situation, and that could be anywhere. It could be a mall, it could be a school, it could be a place of business. The initial responding officers will arrive, and they will access that building, and they will locate the person that's the threat, and they'll stop the threat by whatever means that might be. And what they've found across the country is that that's what, since Columbine, that's how the police have been handling it. What we haven't trained on is the aftermath. We train on critical incident aftermath, but the aftermath of these specific events, where now the police have most likely stopped the threat, but it's not completely stopped yet until you know for certain. So the zone goes from hot to warm, and during that warm stage, departments across communities across the country haven't been training or giving the equipment to the fire department to go in and deal with the aftermath before that scene comes cold. So what's happening is the injured or the people that might be dying are not being tended to soon enough. So what this would do is you would have to provide the equipment and the training to the fire department to don this equipment, go with the tactical officers and go into that building and start treating the injured people as that scene is still winding down.
So if I'm hearing that correctly, then we're going to be allowing non-law enforcement personnel to be entering I know we call it warm, but it will still be considered a hot zone if the threat is not negated. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, it's somewhat correct, other than it should be a hot zone. They're not gonna go into a hot zone. They would go into a warm zone after that initial threat is mitigated. But there could be more people involved. You don't know. So you have to treat it as if there is. And so the next stage would, once it turns into a warm zone, that those rescue task force teams and that the paramedic or whoever, you team them up, and then they go in and they start treating the injured people. If you don't, it's very simple. People die.
No, I understand that, but I think it's, to me, I mean, I understand the active shooter scenario, but my understanding is that non-law enforcement personnel traditionally are not allowed to enter the scene until it's completely safe. So I know emergency medical personnel have a job to do, but will they not be doing it until after the scene is declared safe?
Yes, they would.
Because it would involve I mean, it just seems to me that it's sort of the slippery slope to becoming into a law enforcement sort of like training equipment with body armor and so what it seems to be a little bit more involved
So
in just
it is,
allowing
yeah.
them into a warm zone.
Yep.
If that's
And
the path that we should be going down.
It's definitely not the traditional response that's been used. And because there's been so many active shooter situations in the country, obviously law enforcement, fire service is going to adapt to that. And now is the time that nationally everybody's starting to adapt to that. Here in Massachusetts, every police officer and firefighter this year will be trained in ASHA training. And then it will be up to each municipality how they're going to handle it. Some of them are already using it. Some of them are already trained. So, and I've had discussions with the fire chief because it was, if this isn't something that they would do, then it's not even worth talking about.
Right. I think we just need to think long and hard before we decide to send our emergency medical and fire personnel into that situation.
I think part of this nationally came from the fact of the aftermaths of the Boston bombing. Because what they realized is the amount of damage that happened there and the potential for casualties, because there were so many medical people there, that the loss of life was nothing compared to what it should have been. Because even though that was a completely hot zone, everybody activated themselves and did exactly what they should and took care of those people and saved their lives. And so afterwards, when they had national meetings on this and they started looking at what was different, why did everybody live there? Why, not everybody, why did so many people live when they should have died? Because they were dead. There were plenty of them that were dead. But yet, here in Boston, we did what we should, and we reacted, and we saved a lot of people. And at the national level, they started looking at it and they realized that there's a model there and there's something that should be being done when these situations happen. And the same thing, it's the same thought process that happens over in Europe when they have these kinds of bombings. And so to instead make our fire departments, the rest of our medical emergency team ready for it, I think it's absolutely appropriate.
And I'm not disagreeing that it shouldn't be done, but
Yeah.
it's not a simple surface situation. It involves training, as you say, equipment, and liability. And I think it's something that we don't just jump into.
One
Sure,
question.
Andy.
It's funny if you think of, you know, I mentioned Columbine. If you think of Columbine, when Columbine happened, the police responded to that scene and they set up a perimeter. And no police officers ever entered the school because back then we were trained to respond, set up a perimeter, and call for SWAT. That's what we did. We didn't go in. So that was the game changer. That changed the way law enforcement responds to active shooter situations. To now we get there, we're trained to, and we have the equipment to get there, to breach that building, to go inside and stop the threat at all costs. And because of what happened in Columbine, people died. People died that shouldn't have, but that's the way we did it. And so now, this is all circled back to, now we're very trained on going into these situations, but it's taken too long to get the trained medical personnel, firefighters and paramedics in there soon enough to prevent more casualties. And so that's kind of the shift that we're seeing from the tradition that we've seen in the past. And this is national, and it's being pushed here right now in Massachusetts as well.
David?
And so, since we have the dispatcher here, I had one follow-up question on the new capabilities of the cell phone. If I'm sitting in my home with the cell phone in one hand and the home phone, which one, is there one that's better to call 911 on? Is one
Depends if you
quick?
get service at your house.
But you know, is there a delay in time for locating with the cell phone, or is it's just geographic?
It's geographic.
But
Because
when I call from the phone, all that.
When you call from a house phone, it automatically populates on the screen, whereas a cell phone, the map takes a few seconds, so that could just be the only.
And you're gonna, and in an apartment building, does the unit come up on a 911 phone?
On a cell phone, no. If
Okay.
you're on a landline that you have the apartment number listed on your bill, then yeah, it will come up.
So that, it's just something I was thinking about, that it may be better if you have a landline, so it's gonna come up 66 Oak Street rather than somewhere on Oak Street in this area. So, okay, I'm just curious.
So it's mapped, but it's also they have the Google Earth too, so they can actually, you can
But
look
if, again, if you're in an apartment building or at.
you wouldn't know, you just know the building, right?
Okay.
So I'll just sort of wrap up. I'm always amazed when I look at your stats as to how many calls come through dispatch. You know, this is over 3,000 last quarter. And then, you know, how you dispatch them, whether it's police or fire, and the number and variety of things that you're involved with, I think is unexpected from my point of view. You know, I thought, you know, comments Jim made, you know, we're in the sleepy little town of Walpole, and you think there's only certain kinds of things going on. But just like the rest of the state and the rest of the country, we're dealing with all sorts of issues all the time. And, you know, I'm glad that you guys are all, police and fire, out there doing the best that you can and getting trained in the newer things that are cropping up, like the mental health that you talked about, in the school situations, an active shooter and all that. So it's shocking that you have to do that, but I'm glad that you're preparing for the worst case and hoping for the best case. So thanks for all that you've done. Thanks all for coming in.
Yeah, thank you all.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So next up is Fire Chief Tim Bailey with a quarterly update. And before you get going, I'll just say that I really do personally appreciate how well both departments work together. And I know that, you know, you're oftentimes on scenes, you know, one may get there first regardless of what it is, one may get there second. But, you know, you seem to work together really well. Your people know the other people, and everybody seems to get right to business, you know, depending on what it is and what's going on. So I really do appreciate that, and I've seen that in a few specific scenes. That, you know, I was kind of amazed that whoever showed up first got going and, you know, started working on the problem, so it's great to see.
Yeah, we work very well together, so, and the chief and I communicate regularly, so.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me this evening. Last time I was here was on September 4th. Our call volume continues to increase. We're, at this point, our quarterlies are always the same, pretty much the first December, you know. So a year ago, we were on December 5th. We are about 240 runs ahead of where we were last year at this point, and we still have the whole month of December to go. Our permits are up as well, 661 permits, 3,228 emergency calls, 2,472 inspections, for total calls for service of 6,361, or 18.8 calls per service per day, compared to last year where it was 14.8 per day. So that's a number that is continuing to rise, and we don't see that slowing down with the amount of growth that is going on in the community currently. Mobilization. I am the chairman of District 4, which is predominantly Norfolk County, and mobilization is a program through the state for mobilization of fire apparatus. On the Lawrence explosions that happened in Lawrence, Andover, and North Andover, we were deployed on 2 different occasions. The first was the Friday after the event. I was deployed up there as the coordinator for our district, for the other half of the district, and I was up there with 6 engines and 2 ladders from other communities, coordinating the response in the city of Lawrence with the Lawrence Fire Department. On Sunday, we were reactivated again to go up there. This time was with my department and others. I went up there originally as the team leader, but was deployed because of shortness of resources to become the coordinator again for the entire district. During that day, on the second day, when our crews were there, we actually went to work at a 3rd alarm fire up there. There were 3 injuries up there, one which was of a serious nature, where one of the firefighters fell through a floor from one of the towns that was with us and fractured his shoulder. He's still out of work at this time. And the 2 other firefighters went down from heat exhaustion. That day was particularly warm, and they did a lot of work up there, and they should be commended for what they did up there. They worked hand in hand with the Lawrence firefighters in a very difficult situation and had the best outcome possible. We've also, over the last 3 months, had a FEMA activation. We have 2 members that are on the Urban Search and Rescue Task Force for the state of Mass, and they are John Hamilton and Josiah Brown. John was actually deployed for Hurricane Florence. Josiah is still undergoing his training, so he's not deployable yet. But John spent 10 days in Virginia during Hurricane Florence for the floodwaters. Our ambulance receipts are $1,048,181. For FY19, we've brought in $480,000. We'll be switching our program. We're currently with AmbuPro, which does our ambulance tracking and all of our ambulance reporting. We're going to be switching to ESO solutions right after the first of the year. That will give us better tracking of our calls, and we're hoping anyways, and it's an easier platform for our people to use with some of the requirements that have changed. So our billing should stay the same, if not improve. Our billing is actually very high as it stands now, so anything that we can squeeze out of that would be great. Another thing that we'll be doing with the ambulance in the next couple of weeks, actually, we'll be going to double ALS with the other ambulance moving up to ALS. It's something we've been working on for a long time. We have the personnel in place now to make that happen, and we are moving in that direction. So hopefully by the first of the year, we'll be up and running with that as well. We have all the equipment that is necessary to run that, so we should be in good stead for that. The current budget, I have no issues currently. Overtime is right on where it should be for this time of the year. You know, could go one way or the other, and I have a problem, but right now we're doing well with that, so knock on wood, we stay in that direction. Detail billing. Our details have been through the roof this year because of all the construction in town. We've had a tremendous amount of welding details. We've brought in $268,004 to either brought in or is still out there at this point, but the bills come in pretty regularly, of which $26,000 is been in administrative fees that's attached to the billing. We took that over, as I've mentioned several times before, 2 years ago, and Linda does all of our billing, and she's to be commended for staying right on top of it. We don't have very many that are out. Most of that money has been collected already. Our AFG grants, which we've had the two that we've been concurrently working with. We had the training grant last year for the RIT training. We just finished that up last week, so that one is complete. And the wellness grant, we're still in process with. We've done about half of the requirements for the wellness grant. We have a year in which to complete that, so we still have some time to finish that out. Our SAFE grant was renewed again for $4,308. That is the grant that we used to go into the schools. Our senior SAFE grant was also renewed for $2,615. That's for us to do senior SAFE safety education with our seniors, of which we have the same person, Peter Armstrong, is in charge of both of those programs, and he does an excellent job with that. Fire prevention still remains extremely busy. Many of the large-scale projects are actually coming out of the ground currently. 95 West Street, if you've driven by there, you can see that the upper floors are starting to go on. 1034 East Street, the base is pretty much done, and they'll be coming up out of the ground. I was at the woodworker site last week because that is now vacated, and was dealing with some fire prevention issues over there, and they're getting ready to do their process. We actually have a meeting there tomorrow. So those are some of the more notable ones. We've got the two hotels which have been completed. We actually had a fire in one of them on Saturday morning. We had a dryer fire that caused quite a bit of smoke throughout the first floor. It actually banked down to the floor on the first floor. We were able to get that restored, get the systems back up, help them with some of their cleanup, and got them back so they were able to operate later on in the day. So the crews should be commended for that. The deputy attends monthly Fire Prevention Association meetings. Those are full-day training sessions that he goes to on a monthly basis that keeps him up to date with the fire code and fire prevention issues that arise throughout the state. New fire station, we're down to the last few items on the punch list. We hope to have that wrapped up by our next quarterly. We have had people in this past week looking at some of those issues, and they got a pretty good handle on it, so hopefully we're just about done there. The apparatus has been mentioned before. The tower ladder has been on order, as has the engine. Their dates got pushed out. The tower ladder now is due in March, and the new engine will be due in August. We're still working on the capital that was approved at the fall town meeting. On the training end of things, we've had a very, very busy quarter on training. We had forcible entry training which was provided through monies from that first grant. We were able to reallocate some of that money with approval from the federal government to do forcible entry training. So all of our people have completed that. The RIT training, as I mentioned, has been completed. We did stop the bleed training for all of our groups within the firehouse. The paramedic fresher was held this year for all of our paramedics. That was done in-house. We had two members, as I mentioned earlier, that were on the urban search and rescue, John Hamilton and Josiah Brown, that participated in the Vigilant Guard exercise that was held about a month ago. We have hands-on training with a house that's under demolition on Lincoln Road, so we've sent our crews up there last week to do some hands-on fire training. We had the deputy attended an active shooter training through the NFPA. I attended an OSHA training in Foxborough with some other members of the town. And all of our members were trained on CPR this past fall. The fit test training for the new fit tester for our breathing apparatus, which is a critical component and has to be done yearly. We have a new piece of equipment. We've received the training on that, so that's up and running. The O2X training, which is part of the wellness grant. We have 4 now trained individuals, 1 on each group, that is for the wellness equipment that we received, and they are like mini trainers of the program, the O2X program, and we've had O2X actually come in and do some other training with them, and there's 1 more component to go that we'll be doing in the spring, and then that'll finish out the grant. We also did dispatcher training, the deputy, myself, and Lieutenant Peter Carter. We did some dispatcher training over at the PD with all of their dispatchers just to go over terminology, how we operate, our run cards, and a bunch of other things that pertain to the fire side of the dispatching. On the personnel side, all of our recruits have graduated. The most recent ones graduated 2 weeks ago. The other 3 graduated 5 weeks prior to that. They've all been assigned to their own, to their groups, and they're all working very well. Firefighter Andy Abady he left the employment of the town last week. He aged out, and Andy was a late hire for us a few years ago, but he had done 7 years of provisional time with us. So he did, all in all, he did about 10 years of full-time service with us. And we hate to see him go, but we wish him well, and he did 20 years with us here in the department. Our open house was held in October. It was another great event. Senior Safe Open House was held at the fire station so that we could give tours of the new facility and explain the new facility, and then we offered lunch afterwards. And I wish everyone a great holiday season. I'll take any questions you may have.
Thanks. Yeah, let me open it up for questions. Ian?
Sure. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That must have been quite precarious up in Lawrence with the
The hard part for me was that I coordinated from the staging area, so I had other chiefs that were with all of our personnel. So hearing what was going on
Coordinating
and
them.
not being able to be there was the hardest part for me, but they did a great job there.
Well, thanks for doing that. I know that was probably much needed up there.
Yeah, all in all, just if anyone's interested in the numbers, they mobilized 160 engines and 28 ladder trucks over the 5-day period, so between the 3 communities. So it was, and they're still dealing with, not so much on our end of it, but although they're having issues, but they're still dealing with that. That'll be a long-term.
Just out of curiosity, was the role for the fire department personnel more to supplement for if there were fires up there, or was it actually for the explosions? Were you there to help them with their fires?
So when we went up there, there were actually active gas leaks and potential gas leaks and odors, and people just calling on thinking they may have smelled something or actually smelling something. So we did a lot of gas calls on the first day. We actually went around on the first day and helped with gas company employees. There was a police officer, a fire company, and gas company employees that went house to house shutting off all the services, and we did that as a team. So I was in the staging area, and we would literally send out this group go, and we were tracking everywhere that every group went, and they were by street. So this one would go to Bailey Street, this one would go to Broadway, this one would go, and that's how they were tracked. So
Very precarious.
so.
Thank you. I did have a couple of issues that I wanted to chat about, and we had discussed it at our last meeting. One of the pressing issues are the parking spaces at the municipal lot, and I don't know if town administrator, if we talk about it, we can talk about it later, we can talk about it now.
Talk about it now. I know you are interested in some. Last I had asked was, please identify those spaces. So do you have the spaces in mind?
Did you respond, and I haven't checked my email, but with the schematic of the fire department spaces?
Yeah, I sent that out. Yeah.
All right, and I haven't looked at that. But off the top of my head, I know that there's 3 spaces inside, there's 33 spaces total. 31 spaces.
That are allocated to the fire department.
Right. Is there any way to reduce that and bring some spaces back into the municipal lot for public parking, in particular the ones that are outside the boundary of the firehouse and the adjacent land? There's some on the outside of the little barrier, and then the ones that are behind jalapenos.
Now, the ones that are behind jalapenos are specifically used for fire personnel. Chief, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the ones you're talking about, the 3 in question, are over near the generator, if I'm not incorrect there. So I think that we may be able to do something there. The fire personnel do use those specific ones near jalapenos in the quilt shop.
I understand they use them, but as I've mentioned to you in my email, not verbally, but in the emails, there have been complaints by residents for the perception, the appearance, and business owners that are there. And I know the reality is that there are a lot of spaces in the municipal lot, but I think the public would like to see more spaces available to them in that area. Is 31 spaces? I know you have how many personnel on a shift? So
we're maxed out. The station was built for 11, so the the parking was done with 11 in, 11 out, so there's 22, and then we recall a lot. So a lot of those spaces are for recall, so that's how it was all designed out. One of the concerns that I have with the jalapeno side is it's one way, and so what ended up happening was we took the ones that were on the jalapeno side because they're inside the courtyard of the backyard of the firehouse, and we had those designated as fire, and we gave all the other ones that we had designated as fire on the back side of the island back, and those are now public spaces along the back side of the thing, with the exception of the 4 or 5 that are down by the generator. We gave those back.
So I don't see a problem in releasing those 4 or 5, that's what the Board of Selectmen want to do. The problem is, those specific spots over near the jalapenos, the quilt shop, they were designed to keep the public really out of there. It says, do not enter. The trucks pull in one way, the DPW trucks are fueling up there also. And I think Chief and I, and probably Chief Carmichael, will be a bit concerned about traffic in there going in and out. So my recommendation is that they designed it this way. We're comfortable with it this way. I don't see an issue with it. Those few spaces outside of the parking area to be released, you know, the chief doesn't see much of a problem with that. But the ones inside the parking lot for the fire station, I would recommend it remain as is.
So what's different about the egress and the driving issues between now and what it was prior to the new building, that it's an issue now?
It's totally reconfigured right now versus what it used to be.
It's one way in where between the old police station and the fire station. And it's one way all the way out until you get to the other end of that, those parking spots that you're talking about at Jalapenos.
Right.
That's one way. And what was happening was we were having a problem with people flying in and out of there on both ways. High rates of speed, to believe it or not.
And the site plan was approved by the planning board.
Correct.
As it currently stands, all of those parking spots.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just saying there is a concern and there's a perception that there are a lot of spaces designated for the fire department. Now, I think it would be a good faith gesture to at least release the ones that are within the confines of the municipal parking lot. And I know that, you know, we said that there's plenty of parking, but there was also the concern with the temporary ops when that was not kept as the 31 or 30-odd parking spaces that was there and was given back to green space. And I know a lot of residents and business owners had wished that it had remained
And in the original plans, that was to be back to green space. Then the board changed, said, do it, try it, and then you guys said, keep it as green space.
No, I understand the background of what happened. I'm just saying that the end result is that fewer spaces were made available for the public.
Well, wait, that's not true though. There's a lot more parking spaces in the municipal lot right now than there ever has been in the past.
Correct.
It was probably up by, I don't remember the numbers, by 60 would be my guess. So, you know, I'm you know, if it's easy to release some spaces, that's great, but I don't want a lot of traffic rolling through where the fire department is bringing in trucks and different things. I'm also happy to take a look at a map if you want to take a look at that. We still have the general issue in that lot of owners and employees oftentimes taking key parking spaces either on the street or closest to their buildings and not keeping their customers in mind. So, and I know that's been brought up, I think David brought it up in the past, so if we want to really take a look at the whole parking lot, we should be taking a look at having people who are in there to work all day or for many, many hours park on the far end of the municipal lot, thereby freeing up the surface places on the street as well as those close for customers. So I'm still in favor of taking another look at that lot at some point and trying to do that, because I do know for a fact that there are some owners and employees who want to park right next to the building, and I get it, everybody wants to do that, but you know, I think it is important that if the customers are the most important thing from their point of view, that we try to help that process happen. So that's my point of view. So.
Go ahead.
My thoughts too are the site plan, based on the size and all that sort of stuff, has a required amount of parking. So that we have to, I think we just need to figure, which you don't have to figure it out, it says it on the plan, what's required. And if they have more than that, that is great. I do agree with Ann that it does look so big, but when the police station was there and all the police parking, nobody from the public was parking any closer than they are right now. And if it's okay, those ones outside of the berm, then yeah, maybe we should. But I do also think there's another thing, like on the weekends, the post office parks all their trucks there. You know, they tend to go and park them all for the weekend in the back there, that maybe we could work with them. I mean, obviously they don't have any room at the post office, but we could find them someplace else to put them that isn't in the downtown business district where people want to go out at night and things like that, you know, I mean, it's always been a problem on the 3rd of July, but maybe we could start working with them. Maybe West Junior High, the parking lot across the street there, maybe for the weekend.
West Junior High?
Oh, I mean Johnson Middle School.
thank you.
Sorry. Maybe they could park there or something for the weekend, because that does cause like a big little block there that I think takes up space. Sorry.
I do like the idea of taking another look at the parking lot, and, you know, like I know that we did in the past, get, you know, the business owners and get some of the landowners and, you know, in to take a look at the parking lot and figure out. And I know it's a problem, and I know we don't have the right regulations and the right signage and all those kind of things.
Yeah,
And everybody's always wants their space closest to their building, but.
yeah, that's the one
That's
way.
but it's a public access, right?
That is public access, yeah.
Right. In my concern is, what, you can go by there at any given time. A taxpayer, a business owner, a consumer. They go through the parking lot and they see a lot of spaces marked FD, and invariably most of them are empty. So, and then they look at the crowded side of the municipal lot. And when I see, and I understand your concern about the approximately 9 or 10 spaces near Jalapenos. But if it's a public way, even if your personnel cars are parked there, there are still vehicles parked there blocking something. So regardless of whether it's fire department personnel or the public, there are still cars in that space. So it's not like it's an open space.
Does it say no entrance? That it's a no, I forget what it says. Okay.
Does that make sense? The public can't see, but, you know, if you're looking, if your concern is to keep it open, then no one should be parking there. But clearly, fire department personnel will be parking there. So I just think it's something for us to look at
Sure,
again
we can
and
take a look at that.
revisit, because I think the taxpayers and the business owners really deserve at least a few more parking spaces.
In this plan, I just counted it up before I turned this, it's about 30 spaces here. So if we eliminate the 4 over here and possibly 5, that'll take it down to 25 available parking spaces for fire personnel.
Yeah, I do think we need to look at the site plan to see what's allowed and what, I mean, we have to make sure. I don't think as a town should be non-compliance in site plans when we expect other people to be compliant in site plans.
Should we ask them to come to a meeting, someone from there, or just?
I mean, we could just get
Ask
the
the
site
question.
plan
You
and
can
see
pull the
what's
site plan,
required.
yeah.
Just now that the work is done there and that the police vehicles are out of there, I, you know, have gone through there different times of the day, and the parking lot itself, there's a good amount of parking places. And now that, unfortunately, Bank of America has left, there's also a lot of spaces in the lot on Greenwood. But so I understand that's a congested little corner up near Jalapenos. I understand the concern that people say, oh, there's vacant spots there, but I also see the fire chief's point of we don't want people to be using that road between the fire station and the old police station.
I think people are using the road. It's a public
Some are,
access,
yeah.
right?
I
To
thought there
enter
was
egress.
Let me look and I'll get
Yeah,
back
why
to
don't we
the
take a
board.
look at that? Are all those spaces, those are public spaces, right up against Jalapenos, right?
Yeah, these are all public, that's all public. Just the red is fire.
And that's a narrow little area for
And I can tell you that
traffic to
people,
be-
when they use Blackburn, are now using it across here too, so.
Yeah.
despite the
But it's
fact that-
outside of the perimeter, so the appearance is that it's sort of bleeding into the municipal public area. That's all.
Okay, we can take a look at that.
And then I did have a question about the surplus inventory.
Yes.
And did you say you had it this evening, or will you have it at another meeting?
What would you like, a list?
Either a list, or I guess my email question was, what do we have for surplus inventory? Is there a plan to dispose of it? Is it worth a
So,
lot of money to the town? What's the,
I can't answer, probably not, but, so what we have is I do have a list, and I've inventoried all the stuff that's at Station 2, which is all the stuff that we took out of the old station, the tent, and our temporary operations down at the other place. A lot of that is gonna be redistributed between Station 2 and 3. The gear racks, for instance, the old gear racks will be reinstituted along the outside, so we have gear racks there. We have some bunking that'll be reinstituted at Station 3 because we don't have bunking there. We have the space now that the gym equipment's been moved downtown. And I could go on and on, but the stuff that isn't reallocated would then become surplus. I'd have to give Jim a list of the surplus equipment, which I have shared the list that I do have now. I gave it to him this evening, just before this meeting, but of the stuff that is determined to be surplus, I would make out a list of it. It would be posted, I believe, and there'd have to be a certain amount of time, and people could come and, I guess, I don't know how the process works. I know it has to be approved by your board.
So now that I got the list from the chief, I can share it with the board. I would like to do it all in one shot because I'm talking this stuff over at the old police station also at the same time. So I know Dawn's put together a list. Some people are claiming some things. I know the school department claimed a lot. Cindy claimed some file cabinets for us. And whatever's left over there, we're using some of it in the DPW garage, and some of it's being used by the building commissioner's office once we make that transition, probably within the next year. So what I'd like is just to do a one-shot thing, provide the board with the list of surplus now that I have his and we have ours. The board declares it surplus, then we can see if we can, if it has any value, we're gonna do that online auction that I talked about some time ago, and whatever else is left over, we'll probably throw out afterwards.
Okay, that sounds good.
Or use a scrap and probably
Sure.
trade it in Allied.
Thanks for getting that list together. So
Oh, you're welcome.
thank you.
And the other thing on that list, which I don't think should be on the surplus auction, but again, it's up to the whim of the board, is the old fire alarm boxes. There's been a lot of interest in those, and I know that we've talked in the past, actually long before this board, I've been doing this for a little while, but of selling those for.
I think those are real value, so.
For a certain amount to people and letting people buy them, but that would have to come from the board. I don't have that authority.
Sure, we can take a look at that as well.
It
Makes
always
sense.
let the economy.
I have approximately 75 shells.
So we don't want to flood the market. We'll get them in email
Yeah,
one at a time. or-
Right.
Limited edition.
Exactly.
Classic edition.
Right.
There must be a process for setting a price and then just
Early
offering
edition.
them at that price.
Signed copies.
Any other questions for the chief?
I did have a few
Oh,
more
I'm sorry,
questions,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. The South Walpole and East Walpole stations, are those being currently used?
We
or
use
are they
those-
just for storage right now?
Nope, they are used for storage. They're also used for, Station 3 is used for every stadium event that's a sellout. We staff that with 3 people to protect our community, and the stadium picks up the tab for it.
And that's, and then
That's Station 3, South
South
Walpole.
Walpole, and then
Station 2
East Walpole?
is used for storm coverage, hurricanes, snowstorms, whatever I determine an emergency might be that would necessitate opening it. And that would also be for Station 3.
So you're in a really good place of cleaning both of those stations out,
We're trying.
just to make them more habitable for
Yeah,
when you
I mean,
need them.
they're habitable now, so.
Okay. And one last question. I know.
We lost a bay down there is what we've lost with that's surplus equipment that's the issue right now. We lost one bay there. We have the other bay still for another piece of apparatus, but I was able to absorb that because I gained bays with the new station, so I have more flexibility with apparatus right now, currently.
Thank you. And just very briefly, I know you had mentioned, or Jim had mentioned earlier, preparing for the budget, and maybe this isn't the time to talk, but just to sort of set the table. You perhaps are requesting a fire safety officer position, and I just wanted to know, what is a fire safety officer?
So it's actually a fire prevention officer, and it's to do the fire prevention duties The deputy is currently doing all the commercial stuff, and, do you want to speak to it, or? Honestly, it's all time-consuming for him, and there's a lot of other things that I need his assistance on, and I, quite frankly, don't have. He's swamped in that office. We need that body to help with the inspections.
Would it be an administrative position or a firefighter position?
It would be a day position. It would be a firefighter from within that would move up. I've put a dollar amount in the budget as a placeholder to have discussion with Jim during the budget process.
So it would not be an administrative position?
Well, no, it's a day position. It'd be days, Monday through Friday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, and I don't know if we want to talk about this tonight, but one of the issues we've talked about in the past is the whole cancer risk issue for firefighters. I know the Globe did an article, and there's lots of articles seeming to go around right now. And I just wanted to check, I think you got gear, the equipment to do gear cleaning.
Yes, we do.
And I know that we've talked at some point in the past about the second set of gear and why that's what the state, nationally everybody's trying to go to that. Where do we stand with that? Are we still single set of gear?
Single set.
Okay. So we should have a talk about that as a part of the budget discussion, because, I know we've talked about it from time to time. I know I've read a lot of stuff, but it was just interesting with the Globe covering it again and sort of bringing it back into focus for me that, you don't think about it, but, you go out to a fire, you're covered in bad stuff, you can clean it off, but is it really clean? What if you have to go right back out? So I do understand the whole second set of gear issue, so maybe you can have some discussion with Jim about what would that cost, and
Sure.
how would you go about doing that? Do you have enough storage for it and all that? Because it seems to be a big issue nationally, and, I'm glad the Globe picked up on that as well.
So I can answer some of the questions. We do have the storage capability because we built it into the new station for them to be able to handle a second set of in their racking that they currently have. One of the issues that we have is that the gear is supposed to be cleaned, as you said, after a fire. When we get back to the station, it's not supposed to be left in service. It's supposed to be put into the washer and then put into the dryer. The dryer takes 8 hours to dry. So if they're on shift and they get that fire first thing in the morning like they did on Saturday, they now have nothing else to put on. So the gear is expensive. It's about $3,000 a set. So and
So's cancer.
we'll go
Yeah,
from there.
but let's get that discussion started, and, once we sort of have an idea of how big a number that is, we'll figure out what to do. But that, I know that I talked about it a couple of years ago, and then I sort of dropped the ball, and I apologize for not keeping that high on my list, but the Globe article brought it back into focus for me. So.
And NFPA has a 10-year requirement on gear, and we're coming up on that in the next 2 to 3 years. I have it actually in my capital, so
Okay.
Addressing the current gear, never mind
Yep.
a second set. So
Okay, thank you.
Quickly, 3,000 by times how many?
currently 37.
So just give us a.
But it has a 10-year life.
Yeah.
So if you amortize it over 10 years.
So a lot of our stuff through NFPA has age limitations on it. Our SCBA bottles, our masks, our packs, our gear, and what I've tried to do over the years is stagger those in different capital cycles, and not hit with 90,000 this year, maybe 45 and then 45, and that way we have them on opposite cycles. But that's something we can talk about.
Yeah, but get Jim a number and an idea, and is
Sure.
there any other equipment that, the gear is the one that sticks in my mind, but I know you're rotating the scuba bottles,
Right.
and rotating new ones in, rotating the old ones out.
Correct.
But if there's anything else that makes sense to talk about, I'd like to sort of see those figures and, what we would need. So.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Thanks, Chief. I appreciate your coming in as well.
Thank you, Chief.
I thought it was a good presentation by both chiefs, and gets us thinking about some of those issues, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I did tell Cindy I thought we would finish it.
But nope.
We're now way behind, so, but it was worth it.
Maggie's here for something. I think it might be Complete Streets, but I don't know.
Which one?
I think Maggie's here for Complete Streets, but can...
Maggie, are you here for something specific?
Just to, if you had any questions on the complete streets.
All right, how about if we do complete streets next? Sorry, is there anybody here for open forum? Seeing that there's nobody here for open forum, we'll continue on our agenda. Which number is open streets?
Oh, we don't have.
12-5.
12-5.
12-5.
12-5. I'll make a motion to approve the request for reimbursement for creation of the Walpole Complete Street Policies and Project Prioritization Plan in the amount of $1,509.39.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? Seeing there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second. Maggie, do you want to make any comments?
The color copy. Fancy.
Just to let the board know, I uploaded about 2 weeks ago our policy to the portal, and basically what happens is once it's uploaded, we get a score, and I believe we scored, something tells me 96 or 98. We got, somewhere along the line, we missed 4 points, I'm trying to find out why.
Okay. The one issue that I'll raise is, in the 1A discussion, which was good when the state was in, and it's still a few years away, they're working toward 100% plans, then they have to do the takings, and negotiate those. One in particular is one that I noticed in the discussion is, with an 11-foot lane, right at the end of, right at Watson's Candy, basically. You're gonna have an 11-foot lane going north, an 11-foot lane going south, an 11-foot turning lane, so you can turn up, whatever that road is, Kendall.
Yes.
And then you have a 5-foot bicycle lane on each side, and then you have a sidewalk. I think the potential is there that we'd end up taking the parking away from Watson's. And I know that it's on my list, and I know, and I talked to Jim about it, that I don't like to see that happen. That I don't think we should be impacting a business in that way. Those parking spaces that are closest to them are the ones that are used by the, people buying ice cream and running in quick. I know my mother wouldn't go to Watson's if she couldn't park right in front of the door. Literally, she can't walk up the hill from the other lot. So that's one of the ones that we need to take a look at. I'm in favor of complete streets and all that.
Absolutely. No,
But in
I'm
that
in agreement with you
particular
there.
case, I'm gonna want us to take another hard look at what the state's talking about. And, if the bike lane had to get a little narrower or the sidewalk a little narrower, I think we're gonna have to figure that out so that we don't impact that business.
I think
too
it's
negatively.
on my list also.
Okay.
It
All right,
Probably
thank you.
wait till after the first of the year, after the holidays. But I want to set up a meeting with the state's designers, a working session, not a public meeting, but a working session, so that we can figure out how we're not going to basically take these folks' business away. I mean, I've parked there. We all have. And I think that there's gotta be a way that we can buy a foot here and a foot here and a foot here and not make these people lose their business.
I'm completely in agreement with you, so. Ann?
And I'd like to add to that, I am totally opposed to taking someone's property for a bike lane. I understand the need for sidewalks, I understand complete streets, but I don't want this to be the pretext for, not that we would willingly do it, but, when you take someone's private property is their sacred right.
Absolutely.
And, to say that, the state, or that they're gonna force us to take it, to put in a bike lane, I think I will not support that.
And there are other takings there, but in most cases, they need an extra foot or two of grass that was in the island. And most, the mood of the people that were there, most of them were like, okay, it's not really a big issue from my point of view. Case of Watson, so I agree, it's parking spaces that are crucial to their business.
Absolutely.
And has anyone discussed this with Watson? Are they aware of what?
Oh, yeah, this was all part of the discussion.
What's their position?
Miss Tracy was there, she
don't
was
wanna
there
lose
that night at that meeting
They
with
don't
her
want to lose
attorney.
that, so they brought it up. Jim Brady
She
spoke
was
to the
there,
issue.
she had representation.
The other big issue that came out is, the plan is to have traffic. Construction's gonna take a couple of years. And there's some bypasses that they're gonna basically tell people, if you're trying to go through, you really should go this way, go over to Washington, go down in the whole bit. Technically, the road will generally be open in both directions, at least in a limited fashion, so people can get to the local businesses, Stop and Shop, the dry cleaners, Dunkin's, Country Kitchen, the whole bit. There was talk about generally the road always being open in, I think, the southbound direction.
That's what they said that night.
That's what they said, but some of the businesses, you know, like Country Kitchen, Dunkin' Donuts, the gas stations, both of them mentioned that they do a huge amount of business in the morning between 6:30 and 9, as people come by and grab a coffee and fill their tank.
Which
a
they
little
would
bit.
lose if the traffic is going.
So their concern is there any way to have traffic flow north in the morning and then south most of the rest of the day, always? And the state said they would consider that or look into that, but that was sort of the second big item that I picked up on.
I think
And there's a lot of little issues, but I
I
think they
think
were
we
pretty
need to
well.
be more insistent, now that we know, they're somewhere between the 75 and 100% plans. I think we, excuse me, I think we need to be a little bit more insistent what benefits our businesses and our citizens.
And as I said to people in the room, it's a great project. This will benefit the town of Walpole long-term. But in the short term, it's gonna be really painful for all of those business and all the residents who live within the zone they're working on and have no escape route.
Yep.
And I appreciate your wanting to set up a workshop with them. And if you can let us know, I mean, I
Absolutely.
know I would like to see it if I happen to be in town and available. Some of the others may, because it has the potential to impact the town for several years.
Yeah.
Can I just ask Maggie one more question? Thank you. When the state prepared these plans, in particular about the taking of the private property, was this something that we had given them input to as far as,
So
This is
would
one of
be
the reasons
acceptable?
it's been pushed off for so
or
long.
did they come up with these sort of complete
They s-
plans and said, oh, we're just gonna, this has to be done?
They specifically told me last spring when the reason it was gonna get pushed off another year is because they have been pushing off this taking process. It's long, it's arduous, they don't wanna go through it really. So they've known about it, but they've been pushing it off since 1997.
But we did give them feedback in,
Yes.
was it 2014 they were in before with
That-
50%
that
plans
for-
or
Well, it
75?
was 25%, and I believe, was that the night we had the hearing at the Boyden School?
Yes.
I believe, yeah, it was
So
a 25%
there
plan
have been
stage.
meetings where they've showed the plans and the businesses and the residents have looked at it and said, I like this, I don't like this is a problem. Curb cuts are an issue in some
For some,
places.
yep.
So they did hear that, they did modify the plans to some degree and came back with a version. It's not quite 100%, I don't think.
No,
but,
it isn't.
It's getting much closer. And like they were gonna have originally, I don't remember how many traffic lights, and they removed one or two. Net, it's good, but it needs a little more feedback from us to make sure it doesn't cripple us during that period.
But now that we're getting to the 100% stage, and we know it's much more definite than it was at the 25%, now that we know what some of these definitive issues are, I think they need to hear from us.
So I thought the meeting was good.
Yep.
They did keep track. There was a woman who, her whole sole job was to keep
Yep.
track of all the comments and write them down. They'll be in the record. People were told they could enter comments for the record, even if they weren't ready that night. They had up to 10 days. And then they'll put anything in the record that you want if somebody sends in comments. So it was pretty well attended, and the people had some good comments. So I thought it was a very good meeting, but I think we still have work to do.
I'm sorry, what could we do as a board to, as a discussion and sort of a formal?
I think just to back Maggie, and
Position
as we start hearing more from the individual landowners, the traffic plans, when we get to that point, I think we need to back the town residents and businesses to make sure, it will be very painful, but we need to make sure that it doesn't put anybody out of business or injure their business or, those kind of things.
Since the meeting, has anyone reached out to you, Maggie, just for?
And if anybody, if you want to announce, if anybody has any comments, you can make the announcement. Please tell them, if they don't feel like they want to write a letter, tell them to call me. I can
Help
portray
them.
their comments for them.
So if anybody wants to talk about the 1A reconstruction, reach out to Maggie Walker here at Town Hall. And, maybe once you've sort of had another meeting with them, if we need to have a workshop or a formal meeting on that topic. I know there's a lot of people that were concerned, and, I know it's still a few years out, but I don't want to leave it to the state to just do what they're going to do.
Few years goes by fast. Few years
Yeah.
goes by fast. Now that they're getting to that planning stage, now that they're starting to think about detours, we need to let them know as soon as possible it's not just what we're willing to accept, but what is not going to paralyze people and make a coffee shop that depends on morning or afternoon traffic to lose their business. There's got to be changes they can
And we
make.
have more people downtown, with the new apartment buildings, the AQV, the train station, the craft train will be opening. There'll be more people running around, and now we're gonna put a lot of people over onto Washington Street. So I think we gotta really take a look at all those pieces and figure out how to make it work.
Do we have an attendance sheet for who came to that meeting?
I
There
believe,
was a
yes, there was a
sign-in sheet.
sign-in sheet, so.
I don't know if we have it, but they do.
We can get that, I'm sure.
Yeah, my
Oh,
thought
yeah,
is
yeah,
maybe
that's
if we could
probably
get a copy of that, and maybe we could then reach out to those people, either, you know, and if there's email addresses on it, an email, or mail a postcard saying, if you'd like the opportunity to talk with Maggie because you want to express
We
some
made that
concerns.
announcement at the meeting, too.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, but I mean, just, I think maybe as like a little follow-up, if we can get that attendance sheet, I just think that if they want some assistance putting their thoughts.
Or if, and I have to confess, I don't know how to do this, but we could have Mike Donovan put some kind of a bullet or a blurb or a notation on the most prominent part of the website to tell people, if you have any questions.
Sure.
We have, you know, the pretty plans they had up on the
Yep.
boards, we have those. If
Right.
people wanna come and look at their own particular case.
Did you get an electronic set too? I know you were gonna ask them for.
The
got a
big
hard copy.
plans that were on the corner of the table, we were gonna take those, but they said not to because they weren't finalized. They're a progress print. We have the 75s. We've had those for 2 years.
It'd be great if we could put them online on the website, because individual business owners are gonna wanna look at
We've
their.
scanned those, the ones that were on those boards. We
Okay.
pulled them down and we've scanned them, so we can put them up.
Okay, that'd be great.
So they are PDFs, so we can do that.
So any further comments? We have a motion and a second. I'd say all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna-
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'll make a motion to renew, for renewal, to approve the renewal of all alcohol common victual license, wine and malt common victual license, club licenses, all alcohol package stores license, wine and malt package store licenses as listed in the attachment document 12-1.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? Cindy did mention to me the BBC is not on the list, which is correct, because they're no longer operating.
It did not renew.
Okay.
The fire and building inspected and everything passed.
Okay. Any other questions? No questions? So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I'll make a motion to approve the renewal of hotels, motels, and lodging as listed in the attached document 12-2.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I'll make a motion to approve the request for a 2019 Sunday entertainment license for Napa Tandies for karaoke and trivia.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I'll make a motion to award of bid contract number 2019-10 for DPW vehicle maintenance, building, interior, bridge, crane, hoist in the amount of $74,000 to Mass Crane and Hoist Services.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? I am glad to see the garage moving forward, and this is, I think, one of the very last pieces
is.
that needs to be
Yeah.
installed, so that's a great thing. I'm glad it'll be available for this winter for all that maintenance. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Can it? For new business?
I think so.
Yeah. I'll make a motion to approve the one-day all alcohol beverages for the Knights of Columbus on December 15th, 12 to 4 p.m., December 16th, 2 to 6 p.m., December 22nd, 4 to 8 p.m., December 29th, 2 to 6 p.m., December 30th, 1 to 5 p.m., and January 6, 2019, from 2 to 6 p.m. That's it.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Vote on the consent agenda items. These are gifts to the town. And these will be voted all as one item. 2 gifts from the Italian American Ladies Club, gift from Mark and Shannon Marich, a gift from Thado and Jocelyn Kalowski, a gift from R.A. and M.E. Burns, a gift from Joyce Horizumi, a gift from Doug and Yvonne Eldridge, a gift from David, and these are all to the Council on Aging, David White and Masha Greenberg, Patricia Bethony, Claire Griffin Ellis, and Y'all Flammard, Kristen Stevenson, and Tracy Blumquist. And the following gifts, those gifts were all to the Council on Aging, and the following gifts to the Police Department, Lovell's Sports Shop, and the Walpole Police Union.
And there was one
115.
other, the beautiful wreath that is on the police station that was donated from PJ Hayes, and it's beautiful.
Okay, I'll second that. Any further discussion? I'll just say a big thanks to all the people who've made donations, in this particular case, for the Council on Aging and the Police Department. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Old business, Jim, any, have we heard back from the MBTA? I know that we're trying to get them to come in with a lot more information in January. I know that they've been talking with and working with Foxborough. So, have we heard anything back from them?
Yes, they're amenable to coming in January. I proposed January 22nd. They suggested that we put together the agenda, so I figured I'd work with you.
Okay.
I want them to be prepared to address all the items that are on the agenda, not just dance around it a little bit. So that's the tentative date right now.
Okay, so I'll work with you, but if anybody has specific things we want to
For
talk
sure.
about, let's get those into Jim in the next couple of days, and we'll get that firmed up. I would expect a pretty big crowd of people, so we'll want to be ready for that. So
That'll be our January meeting, you said?
Yes,
you said the second meeting in January.
22nd, yes.
122.
And one thing, I mean, I'm sure, Jim, that you talk to Foxborough anyway, regularly.
Actually saw
administration
him on Thursday, yes.
there. Yeah, if you could just maybe have what they have discussed with them, kind of put it into an agenda for us, so
Sure.
that we can hear it from them, what it is they've decided with them.
Okay, no problem at all.
Great.
Okay, just moving on to the TA updates. The 2020 budget, we're waiting for a couple of different department budgets, just a few, to be entered into the Munis system. I plan on probably starting it towards the end of this week, seeing what various departments have asked for and trying to balance that. I know this board had talked about meeting and talking about a draft of budget once I have it balanced. What I propose is, I think I'll have it balanced by the 8th. Sometime between the 8th and the 22nd, I'd like to, if the board would like to meet, I can run through it with you, let you know what went into the budget balancing process and where we're at. And I'm planning on presenting my budget message on the 31st of January, so the reason I'm giving us a deadline of the 22nd is so I at least can take some of your feedback, put everything together, give me about a week to work it into the budget message. So more to come. Does that time frame sound okay to
I propose a Tuesday, which, you know the two dates in January that we're meeting?
It's the 8th and the 22nd.
We meet on the 8th and the 22nd. I don't want to meet on January 1st.
You'll be here by yourself.
So maybe it's, earlier in the month is better from my perspective, so
Yeah.
maybe a Tuesday, or it could even be a Monday or a Wednesday if people have some flexibility in schedule.
We could pencil in the 12th as a work session. I think I'll have it done by then, I should.
Can that work for people?
Is that Friday?
No, that's
That's
oh,
a
that's
Saturday?
February, sorry. The 8th's a Tuesday, the 15th's also a Tuesday.
So when are we meeting, the 8th and 22nd?
Right.
Yeah.
Can the 15th work?
Yeah.
Sure. David, is it good for you? Ian? I see you pulled out
Yes.
your book.
Yes, I did.
Let's say the 15th of January.
7 p.m.?
6 or
6? I'm sorry, what time?
what time?
I'm better
Yeah.
with 7 if I'm coming from work, if you want me here.
No, we do.
Let's make it for 5:30.
Let's say
Well,
7. Let's say 7.
Well, if you have to.
An hour or
Yeah.
two, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Regular BOS meeting, or?
It's just gonna be a budget.
Budget.
Yeah, just budget, yeah.
It's a BBOS meeting.
BOS, got it.
Okay, great.
Okay, insurance negotiations, as you may recall, the last meeting I mentioned to the board that starting to talk with the unions. It's progressing very well. We had our second meeting with them today. I think for the most part, the Insurance Advisory Committee has done a really good job kind of giving me some guidance. They've agreed to what we've outlined there. I may have a tentative agreement to present to you before Christmas, if not shortly after, definitely before the the January 15th deadline that we set there. So it's been a good set of negotiations.
That's good.
So, Siemens, they had their ribbon cutting today, was attended by the governor. I know you were there, Mark, Chief Carmichael, Deputy Barry was there. Well attended, very nice facility there. I actually asked them how many jobs have they created to date. They told me 275. So they're on track. Their facility, their administration wing is just about done. They're about 50% done with the overall construction. It seems as though it's going to be about another 2 years or so.
I have a question about that. So are they in the new building?
They are in the front facility, yes, not the back building.
So they're in the administrative part of the building?
The cafeteria and the auditorium. Okay, just a few dates of note. The next meeting's the 18th, and groundbreaking on the South Street Center is the 20th. Ribbon cutting for the South Street Center is on the 20th. Ribbon cutting for the garage is also on the 31st. That's it.
Great. Any questions for Jim? Moving on. Nancy, you want to do minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes for November 13th, 2018.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any new business? Okay, I would entertain a motion to go home.
Vacate.
To go home.
So moved.
Motion, I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.